You think I can't want you like this? My fake husband, a paralyzed millionaire CEO, said. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The rain had been falling over Seattle all day, a soft gray drizzle that turned every rooftop into a mirror. On the terrace of North Harbor Rehabilitation Center, the air smelled faintly of wet metal and pine. Grace Miller stood near the railing, her scrubs damp, her fingers red from the cold. Behind her, the glass door slid open with a quiet hiss. Logan Hayes rolled his wheelchair forward, the hum of the motor cutting through the sound of rain. The man was every bit as intimidating as his name: broad shoulders under a dark coat, sharp jawline, eyes the color of storm clouds. Even seated, he carried the kind of authority that made people straighten up when he entered a room. Grace, he said evenly. I have a proposal. She turned, confused. A new therapy plan? No. He paused, as if measuring every word. A marriage contract. The rain seemed to stop for a heartbeat. Grace blinked, thinking she had misheard. Excuse me? Logan's tone never changed. My board of directors is forcing me to step down. They claim a man in my condition is not fit to lead Hayes Dynamics. The only way to stop them is to prove stability, to show I have a personal life worth trusting. I need a wife. On paper. She laughed once, bitterly. You are joking. I am not, he said. You are capable, intelligent, and most importantly, you do not see me as a headline. You tell me the truth, even when it hurts. Come. Grace crossed her arms. And what would I get out of pretending to be your wife? His voice softened, but only slightly. Your mother's house paid in full. Your brother's medical bills cleared. And when the contract ends in 18 months, a fund in your name to open your own rehabilitation center. Grace felt the ground shift under her feet. She had heard of impossible offers, but never one that hit so precisely where she was weakest. She looked at him, at the man who could not stand, but somehow still towered over every moral line she had drawn for herself. You want me to sell myself for your reputation? She asked quietly. No, Logan replied. I am offering you a deal. You need a way out. I need someone who can stand next to me when the cameras start rolling. The wind picked up, scattering drops of rain between them. Grace's heart pounded as if something inside her already knew she would not walk away. That night, she sat at her small kitchen table, the fluorescent light flickering above. Her mother's tired voice came from the next room, telling someone on the phone that everything would be fine. But Grace knew it was not fine. The foreclosure notice lay open in front of her. When her phone buzzed, she stared at the unknown number, then answered. Grace Miller speaking. Logan's voice was calm, almost cold. Have you made a decision? She swallowed hard. Yes. Artie. I will have my lawyer prepare the documents, he said. And Grace's this is not about love, it is business. Before she could respond, the line went dead. The next day, she stood in his office on the 40th floor of Hayes Tower. Through the wall of glass behind him, the city stretched endlessly gray sky, gray water, gray steel. A folder sat on the desk between them. Inside, neat pages of a contract spelled out the rules of their arrangement. Grace's eyes caught one line in bold. No intimacy, no affection required. He slid a pen toward her. You do not have to say yes, but if you do, it will save us both. She stared at the pen, then at him. For a moment, she saw not the CEO, not the man in the wheelchair, but someone trapped between pride and pain. Her fingers trembled as she signed. When she handed the papers back, Logan took a small box from the drawer. Inside was a plain gold ring, simple and unpolished. I do not believe in big diamonds, he said quietly. They are heavy. She looked at him, unsure if it was sarcasm or something else. As she slid the ring onto her finger, he murmured, Welcome to our agreement, Mrs. Hayes. And somewhere deep inside, Grace knew she had just crossed a line she could never uncross. The morning after signing the contract, Grace Miller sat alone in the kitchen of her small apartment. The smell of burnt toast lingered in the air, mixing with the faint scent of rain leaking through the old window frame. Her mother's voice drifted from the next room, soft, tired, and trying to sound brave. Do not worry about the house, honey. I will figure something out." Grace stared at the unsigned stack of bills on the table. The bank notice lay on top, stamped in red. Final warning, foreclosure pending. The sound of her mother coughing made her chest tighten. Grace folded the letter in half and pressed her hand over it, as if she could hold the problem down by sheer force. Her phone vibrated. A message flashed from an unknown number. "The driver will pick you up at 3. Bring an ID. Hayes Tower." Grace closed her eyes for a long moment. The reality of what she had done began to settle over her like fog, heavy, slow, impossible to shake off. When the black car stopped in front of the gleaming skyscraper, she hesitated before stepping out. The building looked like it could slice the clouds in half, all glass and steel. Inside, everything smelled of polish and money. The receptionist smiled too politely when Grace gave her name, then led her to the elevator. The top floor opened into a private world. Walls of glass looked over the city. Every surface reflected light metal, marble, the faint shimmer of water outside the window. Logan Hayes waited near the center of the room, the same calm intensity in his expression as the day before. "Grace," he said, nodding. "Thank you for coming." His lawyer, Monica, stood beside him in a tailored gray suit, holding a tablet. "We will go through the terms once more before filing," she said in a crisp, professional tone. Grace swallowed. Her palms felt clammy. "I already signed." Monica gave a small smile that did not reach her eyes. "Yes, but I want to ensure you understand every clause. Mr. Hayes prefers clarity." Logan's voice carried across the room, quiet but absolute. "I do not want misunderstandings. This agreement is business, not emotion." Grace nodded, her throat tight. "I know." Monica scrolled down the digital page. Clause 1. The marriage will last 18 months, with appearances at the events listed. Clause 2. No physical intimacy or romantic expectation will be required. Clause 3. Both parties will maintain separate bedrooms and personal boundaries. Grace felt her stomach twist as Monica read. Each word was a reminder that she had stepped into something colder than she imagined. Logan looked at her, unreadable. "If at any point you wish to end this arrangement, the contract allows termination by mutual consent." Grace managed a thin smile. "Generous of you." "Haga?" He studied her face, and for the briefest second, something flickered behind his calm exterior, something almost human. But it vanished quickly. When Monica left to finalize the notarization, silence filled the room. The rain had started again, sliding down the glass in long, slow streaks. "Why me?" Grace asked softly. "You could have chosen anyone, someone from your world." Logan's jaw tightened. "Because you do not belong to my world. That is exactly the point. You are not playing a role for the cameras. You are incapable of pretending, and the board will see that." "That sounds less like a compliment and more like a strategy," she said. He almost smiled. Perhaps both. Grace's chest ached with a confusion she did not want to name. There was something about him, broken yet controlled, that made her both angry and sorry at the same time. Later that night, back in her apartment, she found Amanda waiting with 2 cups of coffee. "So," Amanda said, half whispering, "you really did it?" Grace nodded, unable to meet her friend's eyes. Amanda sighed. "Grace, this is wild. You are going to marry a man you barely know. For money." Grace's voice cracked. "For my family, for a roof, for a second chance to breathe." Her friend's expression softened. "Just promise me one thing. Do not lose yourself in his world. It eats people alive." "Oh ye." The next morning, Grace stood in front of a mirror, wearing the simple cream dress Monica had sent. Her reflection looked like someone else, someone pretending to belong in a place she never asked to enter. A car arrived to take her to the courthouse. The ceremony was private, just the lawyer, a notary, and the 2 of them. The vows were short, spoken in low voices that carried no emotion. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Logan reached into his pocket and took out the plain gold ring. He slipped it onto her finger with surprising gentleness. "Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Hayes." Grace forced a small nod. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes." When they stepped outside, the drizzle had turned into real rain. The city lights shimmered against the wet pavement. A black SUV waited at the curb. As she helped him into the car, Logan said quietly, "You can still change your mind." Grace shook her head. "No, I made my choice." He looked out the window, his reflection ghosted against the night. So did I. The car moved through the city in silence. Neon signs blurred into rivers of color on the glass. Grace pressed her hands together in her lap, feeling the weight of the ring that now bound her to a man she barely knew. When they reached his penthouse, the elevator opened directly into a space that looked more like a museum than a home. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, not a single picture on the wall. A housekeeper appeared, nodded politely, and disappeared again. Logan gestured toward a hallway. "Your room is on the left. Dinner is at 7. You do not have to attend if you prefer privacy." Grace hesitated. "What about you?" He turned the chair toward the window, his back to her. "I am used to eating alone." The words hung in the air, quiet but sharp. Grace stood there a moment longer, unsure if she pitied him or herself more. When she finally walked into the guest room, she found everything perfectly arranged: flowers on the nightstand, expensive sheets, a view of the city. But despite all the luxury, the air felt cold, untouched by warmth or laughter. Grace closed the door, leaned against it, and whispered to the empty room, "What have I done?" Outside, thunder rolled over Seattle, as if the sky itself knew this marriage was the kind that would test the limits of every promise ever made. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving Seattle covered in a faint mist. The sun barely broke through the clouds, casting a pale glow over Hayes Tower. Grace woke up to silence. The kind of silence that did not feel peaceful, it felt staged. Even the hum of the refrigerator sounded too careful, too polite. A soft knock came at the door. When she opened it, Monica stood there holding a slim black folder and a cup of coffee. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes," she said, her voice professional as ever. "Mr. Hayes asked me to go over a few additional terms. He prefers everything clearly stated." Grace took the folder, her heart already heavy. "More rules?" Monica's smile was almost kind. "More clarity. Trust is a fragile thing in business." "One." They sat in the living room, a space that felt more like a luxury waiting area than a home. The windows reflected the gray skyline. The rain streaks from last night still marked the glass. Monica tapped the folder. "Clause 6 through 10. They were not finalized yesterday. Shall we?" Grace nodded. "Clause 6, Monica read, states that public appearances must portray harmony. No arguments, no visible discomfort. You are to act as a united couple at every corporate event. Hablar." Grace gave a faint laugh. "You make it sound like a performance." Monica glanced up. "Because it is. The world does not reward honesty. It rewards control." She turned the page. Clause 7. No physical intimacy or contact beyond what is necessary for public appearances. You both requested this term. It protects your privacy. Grace looked down at her hands, remembering the plain gold ring resting there. The words "no intimacy" echoed like a warning rather than a boundary. Monica continued, "Clause 8. Separate bedrooms. Clause 9. No interference in each other's personal communications. Clause 10. Confidentiality. If this arrangement ends, both parties are bound by a non-disclosure agreement." Grace could barely listen by the end. Her mind drifted to her mother's laughter, her brother's crooked smile, the smell of home-cooked meals. How far away all of that felt now. Monica closed the folder. "Do you have any questions?" Grace forced a small smile. "Just one. Does it ever get easier, living by a contract?" The lawyer hesitated, then said softly, "Not easier, just quieter." When Monica left, Grace wandered through the penthouse. Each room was immaculate, every surface wiped clean, every line precise. It was beautiful, but it felt like a photograph of someone's life, not a real one. She found Logan in his office, sitting behind a wide walnut desk. He looked up from his laptop when she entered. "Monica went over the updates?" "She did," Grace said. "You are very thorough." He nodded once. "It prevents misunderstandings." Grace crossed her arms. "It also prevents humanity." That made him pause. He closed the laptop slowly. "You think kindness belongs in business?" "I think without it, business becomes survival, and no one truly survives that way," she said. For the first time, his expression shifted. Not anger, not sarcasm, something else. A flicker of recognition, as if she had just spoken a truth he had spent years avoiding. "You should eat something," he said finally. The chef prepared lunch. "I am not hungry." "Neither am I," he admitted. The room felt heavy with unsaid things. Grace turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "You can decorate your room however you like. It does not have to look like the rest of this place." She looked over her shoulder. "Thanks, but I do not think flowers will make it feel like home." "Okay." That night, the penthouse was quiet again. Grace could hear the faint whir of Logan's wheelchair down the hall, followed by the click of doors closing. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, the city lights flickering like restless stars. By the third day, routine began to take shape. Breakfast trays appeared at exactly 7:30. Meetings filled his mornings. Grace was scheduled to join him only for a public briefing later that week, where they would present as husband and wife. Monica had arranged etiquette lessons for Grace, how to pose beside him, how to smile without seeming forced, how to walk beside his chair so cameras caught both their faces evenly. During one of those practice sessions, Grace accidentally dropped the cue cards Monica had given her. They scattered across the marble floor. Logan wheeled closer and helped pick them up. His hand brushed hers for half a second. She looked up, startled. His eyes met hers calm, deep, unflinching. "You look terrified," he said quietly. "I am not used to pretending," she whispered. "Then do not," he said, handing her the last card. "Just stand next to me and mean whatever you say. That is enough." For a moment, they stayed like that, close enough to hear each other breathe, until Monica's voice broke the silence. "We should continue." Grace stepped back quickly, her face warm. Logan turned his chair toward the window again, expression unreadable. Later, when she was alone, she opened the folder Monica had left behind. Inside was a single photograph her and Logan at the courthouse, signing the marriage papers. Their smiles were polite, distant, almost believable. Someone had written the caption already. "A new beginning for the CEO who refuses to quit." Grace stared at the photo for a long time. Then she whispered to herself, "A beginning of what?" Outside, the mist thickened again, curling around the city like a secret. Upstairs, the sound of wheels against hardwood echoed faintly through the halls. Somewhere behind those walls, two strangers shared a marriage bound by rules, not hearts each pretending not to care, and each already failing. The following week began with movement people coming in and out of the penthouse carrying boxes, cameras, and fabric samples. The once sterile silence of Logan's home now hummed with the quiet chaos of preparation. Grace stood near the kitchen island, watching as Monica directed a small team of stylists and media trainers. "This is part of your transformation," Monica said briskly. "You will be the face beside him at public events. You do not need to become someone else, just a polished version of yourself." Grace looked at the rows of dresses hanging from a rack, all elegant, none of them hers. "What if I fail at pretending?" Monica smiled faintly. The world loves sincerity, but a little poise never hurts. By the third day, Grace was exhausted. She had learned how to walk next to a wheelchair without appearing to guide it, how to tilt her head so that cameras could catch both their profiles, how to answer shallow questions about married life with controlled warmth. It felt strange, mechanical, yet the more she practiced, the more natural it began to seem. That afternoon, Logan appeared in the living room, wearing a charcoal suit. "The first event is in 2 days," he said. "You will need to attend a rehearsal dinner tomorrow." Grace nodded, brushing invisible dust from her skirt. "Do you ever get tired of people watching you like an exhibit?" "Constantly," he said. "But image is currency. It pays the bills, keeps the board calm, and buys silence." His honesty startled her. "And what does it buy you?" He looked toward the window, where the city shimmered faintly through the rain. "Nothing that lasts. Chill." Later that night, she found herself in the kitchen alone. For the first time, she dared to touch something out of place. She turned on a small radio she found near the counter. A soft country song filled the air, completely wrong for the glass and marble space. She hummed under her breath as she made tea. When Logan rolled in, he stopped at the doorway. "That is not exactly dinner music." Grace froze, then smiled awkwardly. "It makes the room feel less like a museum." He tilted his head. "Then leave it on." They ate together for the first time. No chef, no staff, just leftover pasta Grace had reheated. Between them, the silence began to shift. It no longer felt like distance, it felt like unfamiliar company. Over the next few days, Grace discovered small things about him: his dislike for coffee, the way he double-checked every email, how his fingers sometimes trembled slightly when pain shot down his legs. She never asked, and he never explained. Yet there was a quiet rhythm forming between them, fragile but real. One afternoon, as part of her training, Monica brought in a stylist named Leo. He was dramatic and kind, with a quick eye for detail. "You have good bones," he told Grace, adjusting the collar of her dress. "But you slouch like someone who does not believe she belongs in the picture." Grace laughed nervously. "Maybe because I do not." Logan, sitting nearby, glanced up from his tablet. You belong because you are in it. That is how belonging works. Leo arched a brow. That might be the most romantic thing you have ever said, Mr. Hayes. Logan's expression remained perfectly calm. It was not meant to be. Still, Grace felt her face warm. That evening, she passed by his office and noticed the door slightly open. Inside, Logan was on the phone, his voice low but intense. No, I said, delay the vote. I will not be replaced because of optics. He paused, listening, then said sharply, if they want a man who can walk, they can find one who can lead half as well. Grace stepped back before he noticed her. She realized then how much he carried, how every meeting, every appearance, was a battle against a world that doubted him because of a chair. When the day of the rehearsal dinner arrived, Grace wore a navy dress that fit like it had been made for her. Logan's gaze lingered a second longer than usual when he saw her. You clean up well, he said, voice quiet but genuine. Do not sound so surprised, she teased, slipping into the role she had been trained for. At the event, the lights were warm, the crowd glittering. Grace walked beside Logan as cameras flashed. She remembered every rule Monica had drilled into her, chin slightly lifted, smile soft, hand resting gently on his shoulder. Halfway through, a guest made an offhand comment near the buffet line. Poor girl, the man murmured, not realizing Grace could hear. Such a shame. She married him out of pity, obviously. Grace froze, her pulse quickening. Logan's expression did not change, but she saw the flicker of humiliation in his eyes. Without thinking, she stepped closer, placed her hand on his arm, and smiled at the man. You are right, she said sweetly. It would be a shame to marry someone out of pity. Luckily, I married someone out of choice. Jumply. The man stammered an apology and walked away. Grace turned back to Logan, expecting anger, but he just looked at her with something unreadable respect, maybe even gratitude. When the evening ended, they rode home in silence. The city lights blurred past, and Grace finally said, I am sorry if I overstepped. Logan shook his head. No, you reminded them and me that I am not something to be pitied. He turned to the window again, his reflection half lost in the glass. Thank you, Grace. Her name sounded different in his voice, steady, grounded, almost gentle. That night, alone in her room, Grace looked at her reflection in the mirror. The gold ring caught the faint light, gleaming softly against her skin. For the first time, it did not look like a chain. It looked like a beginning she had not planned for. The night of the charity gala arrived with a kind of nervous electricity that even the rain could not wash away. The entire top floor of the Grandview Hotel shimmered with gold light and crystal chandeliers. Grace stood in front of the mirror of the penthouse suite, breathing slowly as she tried to steady her hands. Monica had come earlier with final instructions. Remember, she said, pinning the small silver brooch to Grace's dress. Tonight is not about you. It is about him, about the image of a leader who can inspire confidence again. Grace nodded, even though her heart was racing. What if I say the wrong thing? Monica smiled. Then say it with conviction. Authenticity wins more hearts than perfection. When Logan appeared at the door, dressed in a black tuxedo, his presence filled the room. The wheelchair did not diminish his authority. If anything, it made his composure even sharper. His gaze moved over Grace slowly, quietly. You look capable, he said at last. Grace almost laughed. That is your version of a compliment? He allowed a hint of a smile. It is the highest one I give. Downstairs, the ballroom glittered with camera flashes. Executives, reporters, and donors turned as they entered Logan Hayes, the fallen but unbroken CEO, and his new wife, the woman who symbolized his stability. Grace could feel the weight of every stare, every whispered speculation. They made their way toward the stage, stopping for photographs along the way. Grace kept her hand on the back of Logan's chair, smiling when needed, nodding when prompted. Her training had taught her posture and presence, but nothing could have prepared her for the moment when a reporter stepped forward, microphone raised. Mr. Hayes, the reporter asked loudly enough for everyone to hear, do you believe you can still fulfill your role as a husband in every sense of the word given your current limitations? The question sliced through the air. The crowd froze. Cameras clicked, waiting for his reaction. Logan's hand tightened on the armrest. His jaw clenched, but he did not answer. Grace could see it, the brief flicker of pain behind his calm expression, the humiliation he refused to show. Before she could think, she stepped closer to the microphone. If being a husband means standing beside your partner through every storm, she said clearly, then yes, I would say he fulfills that role better than most men I have ever met. The room went silent. Grace continued, her voice steady but full of quiet fire. A man is not measured by his ability to walk, but by his ability to stay when it would be easier to leave. And if anyone doubts that, they have not met my husband. A murmur spread through the crowd, followed by applauses soft at first, then building until the entire room was clapping. Cameras flashed like lightning. Logan turned toward her, disbelief flickering into something warmer. Later, as the speeches began, Logan rolled to the podium. He spoke briefly, thanking donors, speaking about innovation and resilience. But his final line carried a new tone, something more human than rehearsed. He said, "Leadership is not about standing taller than others. It is about lifting others when they cannot stand at all." The applause that followed was genuine. For the first time in months, Logan Hayes looked like a man reclaiming his own story. After the event, they returned to the penthouse. The city lights below looked softer, blurred by mist. Grace set down her clutch and turned toward him. "You did well tonight," she said quietly. He looked at her, his voice lower now. "No, we did well. You saved me from a question that would have broken me." Grace shook her head. "You saved yourself. I just reminded them who you are." He studied her for a moment longer, as if trying to understand the difference. Then he said, "I did not hire you to make me feel anything, but tonight you did." The air between them grew still. Grace felt her breath catch, but she forced a small smile. "I will take that as a professional achievement." He chuckled softly, then grew quiet again. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be loud. The media will not stop talking about what you said." As she turned to leave, he spoke again, barely above a whisper. Her name sounded like something sacred, something rare. She did not answer. She only nodded and walked toward her room, her heart pounding in a rhythm she could no longer control. When she closed the door behind her, she leaned against it, staring at the ring on her hand. It glimmered faintly in the dark, a reminder of the promise she had made, a contract that was starting to feel like something dangerously close to love. In the living room, Logan sat alone, watching the replay of the gala on a muted television screen. When the camera zoomed in on Grace defending him, he reached out and touched the screen lightly, tracing her silhouette with his thumb. For the first time in a long time, he smiled, not as a CEO proving his worth, but as a man who realized someone had finally seen it. The following morning, the city woke up buzzing with headlines about the gala. Grace Hayes silences reporter with one powerful line. "A CEO's wife teaches the world what strength looks like." Twan. Grace scrolled through the articles on her phone, unable to decide whether to feel proud or terrified. In every photo, she was smiling next to Logan, her hand resting on his shoulder. To the world, they looked perfect. But inside the penthouse, silence had returned thicker than before. Logan had been quiet all morning, working in his office with the door half closed. Grace could hear the faint clatter of keys, the low hum of his voice on conference calls. By noon, she brought him a cup of tea, unsure why she felt nervous just walking in. He looked up, his face pale, sweat beading near his temple. "You should not have come in," he said, his tone strained. "I am fine." "You do not look fine," Grace said softly. When he tried to move his chair back, his hand slipped. The cup of water on the desk tipped, spilling across papers and onto his lap. His muscles spasmed sharply, and before he could stop himself, the wheelchair jolted sideways. Grace rushed forward and caught his arm before he hit the floor. His breathing came fast, ragged. "Let me help you," she said. "Leave it," he muttered through clenched teeth. "I do not need help." Her voice trembled, but she did not let go. "Yes, you do. Everyone does sometimes." It took several minutes to steady him, guiding him toward the parallel bars in the private therapy room. His hands gripped the rails tightly, knuckles white. Grace stood behind him, supporting his back as he tried to lift himself. He cursed under his breath. "I hate this. I hate needing anyone." Grace's tone was calm but firm. "This is not need. It is strength. Every time you try again, it is you refusing to surrender." For a moment he said nothing. Then his voice broke, low and raw. "She left because of this, you know, the woman I was engaged to. She said she could not live with a man who would never walk again, or doubt." Grace's chest ached at the honesty in his words. "Then she never saw you the way she should have." He let out a hollow laugh. "Maybe she saw too much. Maybe I was the one who could not stand seeing myself like this." Grace touched his shoulder gently. You are not your condition, Logan. You are what you choose to do with it. He turned slightly, their faces close. You always say the right thing, he murmured. Even when I do not deserve it. She shook her head. That is not kindness. It is truth. For a moment, time seemed to stop, the faint sound of rain outside, the hum of the lights, the heat of his breath near hers. He reached out instinctively, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. The gesture was small but full of meaning. Grace froze, torn between the boundaries written in their contract and the pull of something real. Then she stepped back, her heart racing. We should continue your exercises, she said quickly. He nodded, his voice hoarse. Of course. That evening, she found him alone in his office again. The laptop screen glowed with a half-written speech titled Human Dignity Over Productivity. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then stopped. He sighed and closed the lid. From the hallway, Grace watched quietly. She could tell he wanted to say more to her, to himself, but pride still built walls around every word. Later, when she lay in bed, she could still feel the weight of his hand, the tremor in his voice, the look in his eyes when he said he hated needing anyone. Outside, thunder rolled softly in the distance, echoing the same storm that now lived somewhere between them, one that neither of them wanted to name, but both could feel growing stronger every day. 2 weeks later, the calm that had begun to grow between them shattered. It started quietly, like every betrayal does an email, a phone call, and the whisper of a rumor that spread faster than truth ever could. Grace woke up to her phone vibrating nonstop. Dozens of notifications filled her screen, articles, comments, headlines, screaming in bold letters. The CEO's marriage exposed. A contract for power. Grace Miller, the therapist who sold herself to the highest bidder. Her breath caught in her throat. She opened one article and saw pictures her leaving the bank, her standing outside the rehab center, her walking beside Logan. Words like arrangement, deal, money transfer flashed before her eyes. Someone had leaked the contract. Down the hall, Monica's voice echoed from Logan's office, tense and clipped. We are tracing the source, but the documents are authentic. Whoever released them had full access. Grace stood frozen in the doorway as Logan turned toward her. His face was calm, but his eyes were darker than she had ever seen. Is it true? He asked quietly. Did you talk to anyone? Did you give them anything? Her voice shook. Of course not. I would never not. He cut her off. They know about the payments to your mother's mortgage, the medical bills, every detail. Grace's chest tightened. You promised those would be private. How could they know unless someone from your side? Monica stepped forward. Stop. The board already knows. They are calling for a meeting in an hour. They want him to step down permanently. Grace felt the floor tilt beneath her. What can we do? Monica looked between them, her tone grim. Nothing, unless one of you takes the fall publicly. Logan's silence was sharp. Grace could see the decision forming in his mind. The same pride that kept him upright was now closing in like armor. Before he could speak, she said softly, "Let me handle it." Grace, no, Monica said. If you admit to it, they will destroy you. The media will eat you alive. Grace's voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. They already have. At least this way, I can end it. Later that afternoon, she met Logan Hayes in a private conference room. He smiled like someone who had already won. If you sign this statement, he said smoothly, sliding a folder toward her, you will be protected from legal action. In exchange, you admit that the marriage was purely transactional, and you accept full responsibility for misleading the media. Grace stared at the paper. Her mother's name appeared in one of the footnotes, a veiled threat disguised as legal text. Derek added quietly, if you refuse, we reopen your brother's case, the hospital bills, the insurance fraud claims. I can make all of it disappear, or I can make it public. Your choice. Her hands shook as she picked up the pen. This is not justice, she whispered. Derek smiled. It is business. When she signed, it felt like the air left the room. That evening, Monica tried to stop her before she left the building. He does not know what you did yet, she said urgently. You still have a chance to tell him the truth. Grace shook her head. He does not need to know. Let him hate me. It will make it easier for him to move on. Back at the penthouse, the city lights burned cold against the windows. Logan was waiting when she walked in, holding a printed copy of her signed statement. His voice was quiet, but every word cut deep. So this is who you are. I thought I was the one pretending, but you were better at it than me. Tears blurred her vision. You do not understand. I did it to protect. Do not, he snapped. Do not say you did this for me. I have heard that lie before." Grace stood there, shaking, her heart breaking under the weight of his disappointment. "Then what do you want me to say?" He turned away. "Nothing. The board will have my resignation by morning." When she finally left the room, he did not look back. And as the elevator doors closed, Grace pressed her hand to the gold ring on her finger, realizing that the contract that once saved them was now the weapon tearing them apart. The next morning, headlines covered every television screen in Seattle. Grace Hayes confesses. Marriage to CEO was a contract deal. Logan Hayes steps down after scandal. Grace watched the news from a bus window, her reflection pale against the glass. She had packed one small suitcase and left the penthouse before dawn, leaving behind the key card, the contract, and a note that simply said, "I am sorry." Outside, the city looked unfamiliar gray, wet, and cold, as if it too had turned its back on her. Her phone buzzed endlessly, but she turned it face down in her lap. She did not need to read the messages to know what they said. Words like liar, gold digger, fraud would follow her everywhere now. At the same time, in a boardroom miles above, Logan sat alone. His resignation letter lay open in front of him. The room was filled with empty chairs, yet it felt crowded with betrayal. Derek entered without knocking. "Well," Derek said, straightening his tie, "at least she made it easy. The board accepted your resignation. I will handle the transition from here." "Jabba." Logan's voice was flat. "You planned this." Derek smirked. "Do not sound so surprised. You married a stranger to protect your power, Logan. It was always going to fall apart." Logan's hand tightened on the armrest of his wheelchair. "Get out." Derek hesitated, then shrugged. "Enjoy your freedom, cousin." When the door closed, silence filled the room again. Logan stared at the folded copy of Grace's confession on the table. The words blurred as he read them for the 100th time. "I entered this marriage, knowing it was a contract. I misled the public. The blame is mine alone." Anger rose first, sharp and blinding, but underneath it, something heavier began to sink in. Doubt. The Grace he knew, the one who challenged him, who stood beside him in public when everyone else questioned his worth, would not have done this for greed. There had to be something more. Later that evening, Monica arrived at his penthouse. She looked exhausted. "You should see this," she said quietly, handing him a sealed envelope. "It was in your office safe." Derek had the code. "But this was addressed to you." Inside was a single-page trust document, dated weeks before the scandal. It transferred controlling shares of Hayes Dynamics to a foundation under Grace Miller's name as temporary trustee in the event that Logan was forced out by the board. Monica's voice was soft. "She never told you?" She had the power to take everything, but she never used it. Logan stared at the paper, every emotion colliding at once: confusion, guilt, realization. "She was trying to protect me." "Yes," Monica said. "And you let her walk away thinking you hated her." For a long time he said nothing. Then he asked, "Where is she now?" "I do not know," Monica admitted. "But if I were her, I would go somewhere quiet, somewhere far from the noise." Ove. That night, Logan sat in the dark, the trust document still in his hands. The rain outside hit the glass harder, as if demanding his attention. He looked down at the plain gold ring still on his finger, the one she had chosen because it was light. He whispered into the silence, "You think I cannot want you like this, Grace? You were wrong." At that same moment, across the city, Grace sat alone in a small apartment she had rented near the waterfront. She had started working at a rehabilitation center again under her maiden name. Her hands ached from long hours, but her mind ached more from missing him, from remembering how his voice softened when he said her name. She had given up everything to save him, and he had lost everything to protect his pride. But the story between them was not over. Fate, it seemed, was not done writing their contract yet. 3 months later, the winter light over Seattle had softened into something almost forgiving. The storm that destroyed their names had moved on to other scandals, other stories. Grace Miller now lived quietly in a modest apartment above a bakery, working full-time at the North Harbor Community Rehab Center. The name on the sign outside read "Funded by Anonymous Donor." She never asked who it was. She did not need to. Every time she helped a patient stand, every time she saw a child take their first unsteady step, she thought of him, the man who refused to stop trying. That morning, the center was unusually busy. The director told her, "We are hosting a donor event today. Someone important is giving a speech. Just help set up chairs." Grace smiled politely and went back to arranging the tables, unaware that the man she thought she would never see again was on his way through the front doors. When Logan entered, the air seemed to shift. He was still in his wheelchair, but his presence filled the room. The scar on his temple had faded, and his face carried something new, peace, not pride. The crowd quieted as he rolled toward the podium. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice calm but steady. "My name is Logan Hayes. Some of you may know me for the wrong reasons. I used to believe that leadership meant control. That strength meant never showing weakness. But someone once reminded me that true strength is standing up not with your legs, but with your heart." Grace froze, the clipboard in her hand slipping slightly. Logan continued, "This center exists because of that person. She taught me that dignity does not depend on what you have lost, but what you choose to give. So today, I am donating full ownership of the North Harbor Foundation to her name. It belongs to Grace Miller." Gasps filled the room. Grace could not move. Her heart pounded as he turned toward her. "Grace," he said softly, "would you come up here?" She hesitated, then walked forward, every step trembling. When she reached him, he looked up at her with the same steady eyes she remembered, but this time there was no wall between them. "You once said I was not my wheelchair," he said. "You were right, and you are not your mistakes. You saved me when I did not know I needed saving. You gave up your name to protect mine. The least I can do is give it back with honor." Tears welled in her eyes. "You should not be doing this." He smiled faintly. "It is not charity. It is justice." He opened a small box on his lap. Inside was the same plain gold ring she had left behind. "I do not want a contract this time. I do not need terms or clauses. Just one question." His voice softened to a whisper. "Will you stay not as my business partner, not as my obligation, but as my choice?" The room had fallen silent. Grace covered her mouth with her hand, her voice breaking. "You still want me after everything?" Logan reached for her hand, his thumb brushing the ring. "You think I cannot want you like this? You are wrong. I want you exactly like this, strong, imperfect, and real." She nodded, unable to speak. He slid the ring back onto her finger. The crowd began to clap, quiet at first, then growing louder until it filled the hall. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean. Months later, the community center's courtyard became their wedding venue. No cameras, no press, just family, staff, and patients, who now walked on their own. Grace wore a simple dress. Logan wore a navy suit. When they exchanged vows, there were no promises of perfection, only of honesty. As they danced under the open sky, her hands resting gently on his shoulders, Logan whispered, "You saved my life without ever meaning to." Grace smiled. "And you taught me love does not need to stand tall. It just needs to stand true." The camera panned to the framed photo on the wall behind them. The gold ring, the old contract torn in half, and a plaque beneath it that read, "One kindness can rewrite an entire story."